A knife is on the ground. A man is dead. What kind of man is the killer? Is he a victim, a hero, or a murderer? It is possible that he is any of these. Undoubtedly, the context will determine the answer. Perhaps he wrestled the knife from an attacker and acted in self-defense. Maybe he did it to prevent the assassination of the president. Or lastly, he killed his target in cold blood. What happened before and after the killing brings clarity to the actions of the killer. Context. In life, knowing context, past and future, helps us understand the world around us and live rightly. Context is not only backward looking. These surroundings affect the way we live into the future. A life without past and future becomes meaningless. Thus, context matters to our lives and determines our role in the story. The timescale of this context is also important. Often the next deadline, the daily news, or an Instagram story become the background that guides our lives. The timescale becomes too compressed. When this happens, our lives become frenetic and fleeting. These events tower over our lives. We are surrounded and we can see nothing beyond. This limited context does give a certain meaning. A work deadline is replaced by a family project. Today's headline erases yesterday's headline. There is nothing lasting, and meaning is constantly changing, making it all meaningless. For we fail to see that the daily molehills exist within a much greater context. In fact, two great mountains look over our molehills, mountains that give significance to the daily challenges. What are these two great mountains? 2 points in history, one past and one future, illumine the true significance of our daily challenges. In the past, Jesus, who died, was raised back to life. The Apostle Paul described this as of first importance. This was the first resurrection. In the future, on the basis of much more than human hope, a second resurrection is promised to those who belong to Jesus. These are the two great mountains that put our molehills into their proper perspective. The news of this historical sequence of events is of first importance. This good news was not without effect when Paul received it. It turned his life right side up. His enemies became his friends when he moved from persecuting to strengthening the Church of God. What was this good news of first importance? The expected Messiah died for our sins, was buried, was raised, according to the Scriptures. The Jewish Scriptures in previous centuries had described and anticipated the events surrounding the coming Messiah. In the death and resurrection of Jesus, we see a fulfillment centuries in the making. Here we see the first great mountain. At the resurrection, Jesus overcame death, the last enemy. Along with death, Jesus conquered sin. As Paul, likely in Corinth, elaborated on this in his letter to the Romans, Jesus became a sin offering for us, taking our guilt so that we may be people who do not live according to the sinful nature, but according to the Spirit. So, in the words of Augustine, we are able to not sin. We are set free from the power of sin, being led by God's Spirit as God's children. We do not have to live in sin as slaves to a cruel master. The mountain of Jesus' resurrection is one bookend of the context for our lives. The beginning and the end are both marked by resurrection. When Jesus was raised from the dead, God showed his power over the last enemy, death. This foreshadowed another victory over death, when everything opposed to God's rule would be overcome. This will happen at the second resurrection. Because of Jesus' resurrection, the hope of resurrection is assured for all who belong to him. In the present time, our bodies have life and some glory, but are subject to weakness and decay. We see some goodness in daily life, but it is always inadequate. This is by God's design. Yet these bodies will be transformed into supernatural bodies with glory and power, filled with God's life. Indeed, the dead will be raised imperishable. This is the future mountain that brings our present endeavors into perspective. In the words of Paul, Christ must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. Today, living between the two resurrections, enemies of God persist. Christ rules in the midst of his enemies. Likewise, we will face resistance as we lean in to the hope of God's victory. We must resist these temporary enemies whose defeat has been guaranteed. They are hills overshadowed by the great mountains of past and future resurrection. In light of these truths, Paul urges, "My dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." The assurance of God's past and future victory through resurrection means that our struggle for God matters in the end. How does knowing your context affect your life? In the example of the knife attack, the past context determined the attacker's motive and his future expectations. In life, past and future events affect the way we live. Will you let short-term realities define your existence? Do you let the next thing turn you into its slave? The next thing exists within a context, two resurrections. The first resurrection of Jesus in the past, and the second resurrection of God's people in the future. In this light, the next thing ceases to be your master and is transformed into a meaningful part of God's great story of Jesus' life gaining victory over death. The two greater mountains put everything into its proper context. For more content like this, you can subscribe by clicking the circle on the screen. My previous video explored the life of the pilgrim who walks in light of the past and the future. Check it out. Remembering past and present resurrections will put your life on the right track, God's track. This reflection was based on 1 Corinthians 15 in the Bible. Read it for yourself.